Good morning, and thank you for joining the application tips webinar. My name is Amy May, and I'm one of the recruitment and admission managers here at Side Business School. So just to introduce myself, perhaps I might have met some of you dialed in here on the road as I get involved in some of our international informational events and also running our open day, open house events here in Oxford. My role also forms part of the admissions committee, so I have a fairly good oversight of what might make a good applicant to our MBA programme. I'm involved in the reviewing and reading of MBA applications and also interviewing throughout our application cycle. So thank you for dialing in. For those not dialed in here, we will be sending out the recording to anybody who has signed up. Also, if you are listening in live, don't worry too much if you do just miss one point. Obviously, we'll be sending the recording to you as well. So thanks for joining us from whichever part of the world you're dialing in from, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. So obviously realise that when people are sort of listening into this kind of session, that you're probably all at really different stages of the process. Obviously, I'm going to focus really tightly around sort of tips for applying. So these might be things, don't worry if you're not at that stage where you're not feeling that prepared as yet. I will go into sort of a fair amount of detail as to what the requirements are and what makes a good application. But perhaps as you sort of go on your journey towards an MBA, you might want to listen into these sessions again, because I think your sort of points of reference, and obviously as your research develops, you probably need to inform yourself again. So absolutely look out for the upcoming events would be my recommendation to you. As many of you might be aware, we do have a deadline, application deadline, which is our round 2 deadline coming up on the 1st of November. So we have this session and another session on Monday, the 28th of October, both to cover application tips. So hopefully the picture here on the front screen gets you sort of thinking of that sort of Oxford, University of Oxford experience. Here we can see a photo of some of our graduating students from a couple of years back. But to further sort of get you thinking about perhaps an MBA here at Oxford, I'll show you this image here. This is probably what you think of when you Google image Oxford, and I just really want to show you this because really this is more of an experience kind of photo too. But how does that come into your application? So here as an MBA student at Side Business School, you are very much a member of the University of Oxford. So obviously I think this is important when you're considering your application, is that you're not just joining a business school community, you are joining a wider university community. And so that may have an impact in terms of how you display maybe your potential sort of fit to the institution, to the university. I think when you're applying to several business schools, it's really important as you go on your research that you discover where might be your home for that year or 2 year MBA program, and therefore having a sort of alignment and understanding why you think you might fit to that university or business school is really an important thing to consider. It's also an important another important reason to show you this image is that obviously your experience is not one of just being a business school, so therefore the style of learning here at Oxford is very interdisciplinary, it's very broad in terms of both sort of the method of assessment and the style in which we teach. So therefore I think that's important to sort of point out, and that might be something that as you also go on your potential MBA, your research and that journey towards the MBA, that becomes part of your story as you look to apply. Clearly, this is the business school, which is probably a little bit different to what you expect when you think of Oxford, but Side Business School, located right next to the Oxford train station. Obviously, this is not an informational session today, but just one point I would make there is that it's within an hour of London, so Oxford is within just a 1 hour train ride of the centre of London. So if you're thinking from a careers perspective of pivoting into the UK post MBA, the access to all of those career opportunities in London, and our ability to bring career employers to campus is really very strong given our location. But here you can see this very sort of modern purpose-built business school, and I guess the reason I show you this to sort of juxtapose against the previous image is that we position ourselves as a cutting-edge business school embedded in a world-class university that's really tackling world-scale problems. So I will just speak a little bit about our mission as a school. We see ourselves as a school that is looking to develop the next generation of responsible business leaders. We see that there's never been a greater time to perhaps attain an MBA in a business school that is really focused on how we tackle the opportunities and the challenges that are out there today. Arguably, business has never been moving at a faster pace than we find ourselves in today, and therefore the decisions that you may have to make as managers, as leaders, as CEOs, hopefully in the future, will be ever more complex, and quite often you'll be tackling issues that might not have been seen before. Nobody's tried it out before. There is no handbook, there is no rule book, and therefore what we hope through the curriculum here at Oxford Said is to really give you that basis on which to maybe make some of your decisions in the future as a leader. I hope that maybe just helps in terms of just giving you a little bit of backdrop if you are somebody that hasn't been able to attend an in-person information event. You can't get to an open day here with us. You feel quite removed from the school in terms of being able to sort of physically connect with us. I thought these couple of images were helpful to really get you thinking about the experience and the ethos and the community that you might be joining. And the reason why that is important to an MBA application is that the greater understanding you have of the school that you're applying to, I think the more passionate application you will make, the more authentic and honest application you will make. And you'll also make an application that shows that you not truly fit, but that you feel that really strongly that this is the school for you. Obviously, I'm sure along with a couple of other schools in the process. Equally, we more than welcome people just applying to Oxford, of course. So I just noticed there are a couple of questions coming through already. Just to cover that off, we will be absolutely leaving adequate time for questions at the end. We do obviously have quite a lot of people who dial into our webinars, so we're unable to answer every single question individually. So I would ask that when you put your questions through, if they can be, fairly general, and if you have more specific personal inquiries, then I will be sharing the Oxford MBA email address with you. So this morning I'm also joined, remissively not to mention at the beginning, by my colleague Charlotte Kelshika, who's Senior Admissions Advisor here at the school. And so Charlotte, like myself, also forms part of the admissions committee and gets on the road travelling, meeting with people like yourselves before you've applied. So really pleased to have Charlotte here, who will be a really useful she has a wealth of information when we get onto some of the real intricacies around the application. So
yeah, morning everybody. Sorry, I'm slightly late to the webinar this morning. I've just been interviewing a candidate, so this could be you in a year's time. You never know.
Great. I hope the interview went well, Charlotte. So okay. So I find a question that we often get is so what kind of students do you look for? What type of student do you look for? And I would really just encourage you to remove that that word type, or even fit. I know I mentioned fit earlier on, but remove that sort of from your minds, because I think something you need to be aware of is the openness we have to diversity here at Said Business School. As I'm sure you're researching other programs around the world, as MBA programs, we are terrible, victims of our own facts and stats, in that we sort of provide all of these images and charts and graphs where we tell you that the average is this and a percentage is this. You really do need to think outside the box of those as well, because there's parameters within which you could be potentially suitable to any MBA program. But just to really cover these off and give some context. So we aim to have a class of around 320-ish students every year. We never will have more than 340 in our class, just to give you a sense of the cohort size. And as you probably know, that's one intake every year. Every MBA program will speak about diversity. It's probably in my top 10 used words on a daily basis, but I really do think that the scale of the diversity of the cohort here at Saïd is incredibly strong, and this year we have, through no sense of even trying to do so, ended up with 64 nationalities, which is the most diverse class we have ever had. I think the most we've reached was 62 nationalities. So be interesting to know what those extra two are. And as you can see, hugely international. So I'm sure many of you dialed in here are from many different parts of the world. As many of you, as some people may know, an MBA actually as a UK national is not something that is actually hugely popular, but we absolutely do also, really welcome having more UK nationals in the programme. But just by design, it's a hugely global cohort, and I think that really comes back to again us being part of that, the wider University of Oxford, in that the university is known for academic excellence across the board, so naturally will attract people from around the globe. And clearly Oxford is a name that is known worldwide wherever you go. So I think that is what really sort of helps expand the reach. We're really proud to have 44% female participants in the class this year. Clearly, as we will all know, any institution organisation is striving towards gender parity. For us, it's very much not a quota. The reason this is important is that when you find yourself on that MBA programme, you need to be looking at the community and the cohort that you're part of. You're going to be working in group projects, and therefore when you're in a group project of 5, is it 4 guys and 1 girl, or is it a fairly good, strong mix? I think 44% shows that there's a really strong mix of men and women in the classroom, and as we know, there is more and more research coming out showing how diverse teams perform better. So we won't cover GMAT off too much on this slide, because we do have that we'll come on to that a little bit more in the application requirements. But just to speak about average work experience, this is often a question I have. Oh, I have 4 years work experience. Is that too early? Or I have 7 or 8. Is that too late? And this is really the stat where I would encourage you to see that as an average. There is clearly a point where sometimes people may be too junior, and we'll come on to work experience a little bit more. We do ask that you have a minimum of 2 years work experience. And there is a point where people could be too senior for the MBA and perhaps need to consider the executive MBA. I would really say that this is more around the sort of 13 to 15 year mark and beyond. There are often many reasons where the full-time MBA could still be a good option at around 10 years work experience. To give you, not to go into a huge amount of detail, but the clear distinction between the MBA and the executive MBA would be the level of leadership experience you bring. And the average work experience on our executive MBA is 15 years of work experience, with at least 5 years of leadership experience within those 15 years. So that is how I would sort of urge you to sort of maybe assess your suitability for one programme or the other, equating to an average age of about 28 on the MBA and 38 on the executive MBA. So, clearly people graduate, and some people do masters and some people don't, and people progress and develop at different rates, but that gives you a sense just overall of the sort of the average, dare I say it, experience that we see. So moving on to some of our application requirements, Charlotte, would you like to kick us off?
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Right, so Amy's already talked about the diversity in the class, and unfortunately this also plays through into the undergraduate degree requirement, because we really don't mind what subject you studied for your first undergraduate degree. The class welcomes people from all kinds of different academic backgrounds. Yes, you might have done a degree in something that traditionally prepares you for an MBA later in life. You might have done business administration as an undergrad, you might have read economics, something of this nature, or finance. But equally, you might have studied for a degree in music or literature or physics. Absolutely fine. What we do ask for, though, is a certain level of achievement in your undergrad performance, and that would be a classification in your degree that would put you broadly in line with upper second class honours in the UK system. Don't stress too much about working out the comparison. That's part of our due diligence when you apply, is to convert your qualification to the UK system. So on the application, please just express your degree in using whichever scale is appropriate. So you might be expressing your degree results as a percentage, or as a letter, or as a score out of X. Doesn't matter, we will make the conversion. But broadly speaking, a UK 2-1, in the US system, GPA out of 4, that would place it around sort of 3.5 and above that we would look for. If you are dipping under that, don't worry, because there are many other parts of your profile that we are interested in to help us take a nice rounded view of your overall capability. So just to visit some of those, well, of course, GMAT or GRE score is going to be a pretty important indicator of your current capability, because whereas your degree classification shows us how you performed in that subject potentially many years ago, GMAT or GRE needs to have been taken in the last 5 years max. And that really shows us, I guess, your current capability. It's a nice broad view of both your quantitative, verbal and reasoning abilities, and it gives us a feel for how you're likely to cope with course material. We genuinely accept either test, so take whichever one feels better for you. We really don't mind, have no preference, as long as you give us access to your official score by registering us as one of the institutions that you are applying to. That's great. The GMAT offers a total overall mark, and so that's quite I guess, an easy way for us to say we're looking for scores in excess of X. As a rough guide, a score above 650 is to be encouraged. Class average at the moment is around 680, 690, something like that. Doesn't mean, though, as we've said with the degree, it doesn't mean if you fall slightly short of that we're not interested in you applying. You know, people are admitted to this program with a GMAT score of sort of 600 right through to 780. There is just, I guess, the cluster, the rump of people tend to have scores around about that 680 or 690 mark. And clearly for some professions, the GMAT comes into play for career selection as well. But for just getting into business school, those are the kind of scores you need to be aiming for. In GRE, there is no total score. So thinking about a nice balanced scorecard, your quant and verbal should sit ideally around 160, 161, something like that. That's what we would like to see really as a minimum. But if it dips slightly below, you can potentially balance out your profile with a stronger and more stellar performance elsewhere. Moving on to the video assessment. Now, this is something that is new for us this year and used by a lot of business schools and increasingly by employers. So interesting technology application, and certainly not the make or break when it comes to your application, but really just an extra dimension, if you will. And what this does is show us how you think on your feet. So it's a chance for us to have a little bit of a sneak preview of what makes you tick, how you speak, how you rise to a challenge, much as you might in an interview scenario. So in these video assessments, which you access immediately after you've submitted your application, we will set you a bunch of questions and ask you to record a short video piece speaking to those particular questions. To get you used to seeing yourself on screen and hearing yourself, there's lots of opportunity to practice with some fun questions to get you warmed up. But when it comes to the live take, and you get one chance only to react to these questions, the kind of questions we're likely to ask you are around an MBA program. So why. You obviously will have a very good answer to that, so you wouldn't even be listening to this webinar today. And something also around Oxford. Clearly, you're going to be applying to a lot of different schools. Each school will have its relative strengths. So tell us a little bit about the research that you've done into our offering and why you think it might be the right place for you to do your MBA. The other two questions are really testing some of your competencies. And as I say, your ability to think and also draw on your experience to date. So one of those questions will very much be built around, tell us about a time when this happened to you, what did you do and what was the outcome? The other type of question we will ask you asks you to imagine yourself in a hypothetical scenario. So we will paint a picture for you in the question and we will ask you, if this happened, what would you do and why would you take that approach? So these questions are really designed to just show us how you react. You don't have to speak very long. It's sort of a minute and a half, something like that. And you just have a few moments to prepare your answers, very much like in an interview situation. There's also a short written assessment. Some of these questions are quite topical, some of them are quite fun, and some are a little bit from left field. And they are really designed just to get you to react to a statement. Give us a little piece of writing, and it shows us how you express yourself in English when you're against the clock, just typing away. So again, it's a very, very short piece that you would write in a few minutes. Don't worry too much about this part of the application. Like I say, it's used by a lot of business schools and it's increasingly used in executive selection as well when it comes to careers. So it's certainly a technology you're going to need to get used to in life anyway. Turning to professional experience, we ask when you apply for you to give us a one-page CV. Now, for some of you, that might mean you need to do a bit of a distillation job, really funnel down all of your achievements and your academic accolades down onto one sheet. You will need to bring your CV down to all of the salient points. So your educational background, your work experience to date, where have you worked, what have you done, where was it, and between which dates, and maybe a little piece also around your interests. That it's always good to have a little bit of insight into what makes this person tick when they're not at work. Now, for those of you who are thinking, I haven't written a CV for a while, or my professional CV is really, really long, we're looking for, as I say, just one page, something nice and clean, no wild graphics on there, no photographs. There is a template available on our website and on the application system should you want to see a suggestion, but you are under absolutely no obligation to use that template. That is absolutely fine. References. We ask for 2 references in support of your application. Now, one of these could be academic, hypothetically. Let's say you are towards the lower end of the range in terms of work experience. You might still be in very close contact with an academic who taught you as a student. Maybe they've followed your professional career closely and you're still in regular touch. They might therefore be an appropriate person to ask to be one of your recommenders. The majority of MBA students will have 2 professional referees, however. So 2 professional is quite normal, quite fine. It doesn't have to be your superior at work. We would normally expect to see one reference from someone that you're currently working with, who has perhaps tracked your progress, understands you in a workplace setting and can speak to that, your strengths, your weaknesses, your rationale for wanting to do an MBA, and perhaps offer us some powerful examples of how you operate in the workplace. I think examples are really useful in a reference rather than just some kind of character reference, as it were. So think about who you might approach. It could be someone that is a peer, so not necessarily your superior, but someone that you work closely alongside. It could even be a client who you have delivered significant pieces of work for across a long period of time, and therefore you have got to know each other quite well. We are not overly impressed by someone's job title, so Don't worry about having to track down the person with the most impressive C-suite job title. They probably don't know you particularly well, therefore their letter of recommendation is likely to be rather brief and not filled with real life examples. So from our perspective, not amazingly helpful, and certainly wouldn't help your application. So think about people that really know you well, get them warmed up to the idea of being your referee, treat them with that professional courtesy, let them know you're going to be registering them, they will get an email from Oxford Said, let them know when the deadline is so they can be working on their letter of recommendation while you are putting together the rest of your application, and make sure that they submit by the application deadline. So everything needs to be received by the time midnight rolls around on deadline day. There is one supporting statement that we ask you to write these days. So rather than a raft of essays, the video assessment really helps us have insight into some of those skills, but there is a supporting statement that we ask you to visit, and it's on the list here towards the end, because I think it's something that's almost worth leaving until the end of putting your application together, because the title is, what do you want the admissions committee to know about you that isn't covered elsewhere? And you can really potentially only answer that question after you've completed the rest of the application. So I think, yeah, one tactic might be to leave it to the end. Now, you can use this statement in any way you see fit. Some people will use it sensibly as a way to address perhaps underperformance or relative weakness in one aspect of the application. Perhaps your academic grades suffered in one semester because there was some sort of extenuating circumstance. Others will use the statement as a chance to tell us more about what they like to do away from work. It could be a sport or a hobby or a voluntary commitment that this person is involved in that really adds an extra dimension to their application that we will find interesting and make us want to meet you at interview. Or you could be just talking a little bit more about your professional background. Don't forget, however, there is a very important part of the application that isn't touched on this graphic, and I know that Amy will certainly be speaking to this in more detail in another slide, but there is a large piece of the application form that gets you to reflect upon what you want after an MBA, and that's around your career outcome. It's quite a lengthy section that poses a number of reflective questions to you about, well, okay, what is next after the MBA? What do you do now? What do you want to do in the future? Why do you think this is a realistic, achievable goal? Stretching, yet attainable in a one-year program situation. Tell us about what's going to be hardest about getting this job, the research that you've done, the network that you've built around this particular role or sector, and just start to paint a picture for us around the thinking that you've done with your professional ambition in mind. Now, last but not least on this page is English language proficiency, because some of you will need to provide an English test as part of your application. If you have completed an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree, so a master's, that's been taught entirely in English, either overseas or because you were taught in an English-speaking country and it was taught entirely in English, you won't need to take a test. So if you did your undergrad degree or a master's degree that was taught entirely in English, don't worry about a language test. What you need to do is provide us with evidence of the fact that your degree was taught 100% in English. Now, sometimes this is written on the degree transcript itself. Alternatively, universities will provide standard letters to their graduates that just confirms that this particular degree, the medium of instruction was English. And on other occasions, it's going to be completely appropriate just to give us your transcript, because we will see that you did your degree in the States or here in the UK or in Australia or wherever English is spoken as a majority language as defined by the UK government. So if you've done a degree completely in English, don't worry about a test. if you were not taught entirely in English, and if you are a citizen of a country that is not a majority English-speaking country, as defined by the UK government, now you will find a list of these countries on our website, then it looks like you will need to take an English test. We accept 3 different tests: TOEFL, IELTS, or the Cambridge Proficiency in English test. There is a lot of granularity around the minimum scores that you need to achieve on our website, so I won't go into those now, but suffice to say you do need to meet those scores. This is an absolute non-negotiable level of proficiency that's set by Oxford University, so this is not something the school want you to do. This is something Oxford University needs you to do, and you need to satisfy this at application stage. You also need to make sure that your English test was taken in the last 2 years. So check the date on your IELTS or your TOEFL. If you think it might have expired, you will need to resit and make sure that those tests are up to date and meeting all of those standards. But as I say, so many of our applicants were taught in English throughout their undergraduate degree that this is not necessarily going to be applicable anyway.
Okay, moving on. So just to maybe explain a few more just technicalities around the video assessment. Charlotte covered quite a lot of information there. I'm going to just give you a scenario to help you understand how you might prepare for the video assessment. So our application deadline, for example, is say the 1st of November. The video assessment is one of the application requirements, so therefore that needs to be submitted by the stage deadline. How you get access to this assessment is what I'm going to explain. So you start your MBA application. You will see all of the written elements that you will complete: personal details, the career section, the supporting statement, uploading transcripts, etc., uploading your GMAT GRE, for example. In order to get access to the video assessment to practice with the online tool, you need to have submitted your application. So this effectively means that if you want to be able to practice with the online assessment for a week or 2 weeks, or ensure that you have a weekend so that you've got some time to practice with it from the comfort of your own home, that you might want to look at submitting your application perhaps a week or 2 before the deadline. So cast your mind back, look at your schedule, see how busy you'll be, and figure out the point at which you want to submit the application. That doesn't mean we start to review your application. What that means is that at the point that you submit, you will be taken immediately to a landing page where you will then be able to create your profile for the assessment tool. At this point, your references can also still be outstanding. All of the other elements of your application should be complete. So you cannot then go back and revise your supporting statement. You cannot go back and then revise your career vision, for example. So to make that very simple, all of the written elements should be complete. And at that point, your references can be outstanding, and then you look to start the video assessment. Hopefully that is clear for you. The reason why we want to explain that is we don't want a situation where you haven't figured this out. It's the 1st of November, you're at work, you're looking to submit for that evening. It's very much on 23:59, what will be Greenwich Mean Time by the 1st of November, UK time, and you literally have a few hours to practice with the tool and do your live assessment. So if that were me, I would look to submit my application a week to 10 days before. I would perhaps spend a few evenings having some practice sessions with with the tool. Just to let you know, we absolutely do not see your practice sessions. So if you want to do this in your, in your hoodie or in your loungewear at home, you can. We will not see your practice sessions. We also will not see how many practice sessions you have undertaken. So as many as you wish to do, you can. And then you perhaps want to set an evening or some time aside where you will do the live assessment. And the live assessment, I think, as Charlotte mentioned, will take about 30 minutes to complete. We've just gone through our round 1, which closed in early September. This is the first year we've had the tool in place. It's been really successful. The query rate, if you do have a query or you have a technical issue, will go directly to the online assessment company called Kira Talent. Their query rate is incredibly low. It operates on a very sort of low level of Wi-Fi. Just to give you an example, we had a couple of people submit who are on military tours right now. So you really should not be too worried about Wi-Fi connection. Equally, obviously, make sure you're somewhere where you know you're going to have a sort of quiet environment and you're not going to be interrupted. We really want to see the authentic you through this assessment, and I think that's what we genuinely saw from people in this first stage that we've just gone through. Obviously, I appreciate there might be some questions about this assessment as we move into some time for questions. So perhaps we'll leave it there with regards to the online assessment for now and move on to the next slide. So Charlotte alluded to there's an area of that application, the career vision, where we can really sort of start to see the purpose and some strength around your application. And that what we gain from the career vision section is that we start to really understand why you want to do the MBA. I think through the online assessment as well, this is the other area in the two motivational questions where we also really understand why you want to do this MBA, because this is about as much about you being the right candidate for us as us being the right candidate for you. So that's why it's very important that you don't try to be something you think we want you to be, and you tell us exactly sort of who you are. But these are some of the, this is some of the things we're trying to gain overall from the application. So let's start with leadership. I've mentioned this is an early to mid-stage career program. You might already be a leader, you might already be a manager, that is fine. If you are not, that is absolutely not a problem. But coming to an MBA, like Oxford and probably similar schools that you are considering, we are looking for future leaders. We're looking for people with leadership potential, and employers who are hiring MBAs are absolutely first and foremost, along with a couple of other things, looking for future potential leaders. So we are looking for you to show leadership potential and leadership ability, and that may come through in some of the just your aptitude, experience that you've had. Perhaps you're somebody who's been given experiences outside of your comfort zone to maybe lead a project or to mentor people, or to really sort of step up and support others. But you might not be formally a leader. Your job title might not show us that you are a leader, but you can show leadership ability and skills through your CV, through how you answer maybe some of the questions in the online assessment, and also through that career vision section. Communication, obviously this comes across, this actually comes across in every element of your application, your ability to communicate your vision, your purpose, and I tend to call it your why. I think there's nothing stronger than the why of your application. But clearly the academics, your GMAT or GRE, your bachelor, any other further qualifications you have, very much are the entry to the race. It would be very rare that someone would just get admitted to the programme on the basis of having the best GMAT score we've ever seen. It's based on many other facets to the application, and communication skills are something that can really help you shine out in both the written application, absolutely in the online assessment, and in any subsequent interview that you then go through in the later part of the application stage. So really think about your style of communication, how you put your vision into words, and this is where obviously really showing your authenticity and your honesty will really come through. Teamwork, I think you can show that again in all of the different elements that I've just mentioned as well. Be under no disillusion. I'm losing my words now. Be under no. I'll start that sentence again. I think you absolutely need to be aware that coming into an MBA, it's it's very sort of a two-way thing, in that it's probably the year of your life that you will probably be the most selfish, and you will need to find time for your own headspace to be able to really develop your plans and really carve the year out so that it is absolutely pushing towards your future goals. But teamwork will probably have never been more crucial than when you come here. So you will be working in hugely diverse teams. You'll be working with people that you probably just would have never come across in your both your professional life or your personal life. You'll be working with people from parts of the world that you've maybe never interacted with people from before. People with different working styles to you. People that you might not instantly like, you might not get along with. And people of very different cultures as well. And so we really, it's fine if you have always lived, worked and studied in one country, and your point of reference is very much the place in which you have grown up and worked. But we are absolutely looking for people who can demonstrate the ability that if we threw you into a team with 5 people from different corners of the globe, all from different backgrounds, all with very different agendas, that you would be able to make that work. And I think there's absolutely ways that you can show your ability, to work well in a team. We aren't looking for you to tell us that everything has always been perfect or always, through rose-tinted glasses. We want to, hear if, you have worked in difficult teams and you've maybe overcome that. So you absolutely can also get that across, particularly in your resume. If you happen to get a question in the online assessment that was around, that sort of handling objection, teamwork environment, there's definitely a focus on teamwork, I would say, in those questions. And then moving on to career vision, obviously, this section of the application absolutely gives us an understanding of why you want to do the MBA. It's important to think about your career vision in terms of both your immediate post-MBA goals and longer term. So to give you an example here, let's just say you have an immediate goal, which might be an employment, but ultimately you want to end up an entrepreneur. You might make the focus of your career vision around the immediate post-MBA goal, with maybe a portion of that attributing to, I'm hoping that the MBA will give me those longer term entrepreneurial goals. We're not looking for you to give us a detailed business plan unless potentially your immediate post-MBA goal is entrepreneurship, for example. But we want to see you telling us how you're going to sort of land that opportunity post-MBA. You might not be the expert on that at this stage, but if you're somebody that's going to the to the length of completing this application and you've got to the point where you're applying to schools, you really should have an understanding beyond just the name of an organisation as to why you think you might be a fit, why they might hire you. Actually, what skills do you not have that you need to acquire in the MBA? Potentially that's why you're looking to do the MBA, because there are some gaps, there are some holes in your experience, there are some skills that you need to strengthen. You could also be somebody from a family business. You could be returning to your company. Perhaps you're looking to acquire some skills to sort of take back and accelerate your career in your current employer, or perhaps you're going back to a family business or looking to expand or take your family business somewhere it hasn't been before. This all fits into career vision. And I think this really sort of, all of these things tie back to awareness. We are looking for people who absolutely have lofty goals. This is Oxford. We're looking to develop the next generation of future leaders, future responsible business leaders. But there is a sense of you needing to have a level of self-awareness as well. Is what you're looking to do, realistic, in line with your experience, in line with the skills that you have and the skills that you can acquire whilst you're here on an MBA. So, an MBA clearly is going to give you that step up. It is also by no means the golden ticket to an opportunity, regardless of the background or experience, or more importantly, the EQ and personal skills that you bring. So really do have a think about that, is what you're looking to do Am I self-aware of the reality of what I'm looking to do? So hopefully that just gives you a few more tips around how you might frame some of your answers, frame some of the written pieces, the online assessment piece of the application. So we're just going to swiftly go over sort of application deadlines, and then we'll move on to, we'll have sort of close to 15 minutes of questions. So our application deadlines, as you can see, the first deadline has passed. We have 3 deadlines remaining. The rule of thumb really is that if you were to apply with an application that meets our requirements, that is what you feel is therefore a robust application, is an application that you feel proud to put forward to us, and is what you feel is going to be your best application, then you should look to submit. If it is not those things, then I do not recommend submitting. Some people say, well, I submitted earlier because if I hadn't submitted earlier, then I wouldn't have been considered for scholarships because the scholarship funding goes in the earlier rounds. Obviously, just think about that the other way around. Potentially, if you're applying with an application that is not so strong, and clearly people with strong applications across the board are generally receiving funding and scholarships, you're defeating the object, the purpose of making that application in the first place. And also remember, if you are rejected, you then cannot reapply until the next application cycle. So I would never suggest rushing for September, November, if with the benefit of waiting to January, your chances of admission were increased. And a good example of this may be you've taken the GMAT one time, or the GRE, you've got what is a competitive, robust score, but it's not what you felt was definitely your best. Absolutely, I would recommend you retake, and therefore potentially maybe you apply in January. I haven't yet mentioned the April round, and this is really because we would recommend applying in the first 3 rounds if at all possible. This is really because in the last round, for the last 3 admission years cycles, we have operated a wait list. And very, very good candidates have found themselves in the position of not receiving an offer for that admission cycle due to a lack of space available at the end of the year. So if at all possible, we do recommend applying in one of those first 3 application rounds. Hopefully that's clear. Happy to take any more questions on that. Anything you'd add there, Charlotte?
No, but one thing I omitted to mention on the other slide that I will speak to now, so apologies everyone. When I was talking about degrees and how we welcome any subject, we didn't talk about what documentary proof we need of your degree, and you might be thinking, well, I don't know whether I need to upload my transcript or my degree certificate. Your transcripts, please. We need to see those transcripts, or mark sheets if you like, that show us your academic performance throughout the duration of your studies. So if you have an unofficial copy in your possession, that is absolutely fine to upload as part of your online application. We don't need your official transcripts in order for you to apply. So unofficial copies or screenshots from your student portal, your university portal, that's fine as things currently stand for the application. So,
okay, we're going to move on to some questions. If you do have questions at this point, please do send them through as soon as you can, so that we can get through as many as possible, and we'll try to make this process as succinct as possible. So we have a question. Thank you for hosting the webinar. Do we have a preference or higher acceptance rate for any particular deadline or round? So hopefully you just sort of covered that a little bit, but what I would add is that in the first round, typically the standard of application is quite high. Why would you apply in the first round unless you were like, yeah, I've got the best application possible that I'm going to put forward? So therefore, I would really urge you to consider how strong your application possibly is if you are looking at the first round. Obviously, if the first round is gone, but I'm sure there's people on here who are looking at next application year. So that is really just something I would just urge you to think about. But as we've said, largely speaking, the acceptance rate is similar across those first 3 rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I'd just add to that around scholarships and funding, for those of you who may feel that that is important, you need to apply in one of the first 3 stages. The Oxford University deadline for scholarships is in line with our January deadline. So in order for you to be considered for the widest possible pool of money, you need to submit and be complete in either the September, November or January round.
Okay, so is there a score on the GMAT that's considered low enough to warrant explaining why the GMAT is that score in the supporting statement? So the supporting statement is to tell us anything, 250 words to tell us anything else that isn't covered in your application elsewhere. So to give you an idea, our GMAT ranges from probably early 600s. So we obviously recommend from 650 and above. So that does tell you there are a small number of people that do have been admitted to the programme with a GMAT of less than 650 or a GRE of less than 160 and 161. And that might be the point at which you look to explain that GMAT or GRE score. However, that's a 250 word piece where you would not want to dedicate the whole 250 words to, you know, the Achilles heel or the weak part of your application. So I would do that as sort of a finishing note, potentially, or as an extra sort of note at the end.
I agree. And I think Amy was spot on with some advice earlier about if you really are sitting on a GMAT score that you don't think showcases your true ability, and if you are planning your application well and leaving enough time, retake. You only have to wait 16 days to retake the GMAT these days. So if you know that you can show some uplift by resitting, well, do it, because you have nothing to lose, and you can probably make your revision really tactical, because you could see that your scorecard is maybe really out of whack, and perhaps, let's say, your verbal is strong and your quant is really low and surprisingly low. For you can really focus your revision energy around the math quota and show some uplift in a resit.
Okay, when do we receive the majority of applications? So the biggest application round for us is always the January round. So as much as, you know, the sort of argument that your chances are increased if you're in the first or second because we haven't made any offers, in reality we would always make the biggest number of offers in stage 3, but that is just by virtue of the fact that it's the biggest application round. So really, you know, as we've said, stage 1, 2 or 3, absolutely you should have no hesitation in applying if you have what you feel is the best application.
Good question here from an Oxonian out there thinking of coming back to do their MBA. So someone studied at Oxford before, maybe it might be for an undergrad degree, saying, will we have access to their transcripts? I'm afraid no, we don't. You are treated like any other candidate. You will need to obtain your transcripts, please. And you can do that online these days and just upload that. We won't be able to access your records from your college or from your previous academic department.
So somebody asked me about average GRE score. So a 650 GMAT equates to a 160/161 on the GRE. So that is the, obviously our average GMAT is around the sort of 680 mark. So that puts our average GRE in the low 160 element score on either element. Hopefully that gives you some clarification. Somebody here who's just started thinking about doing an MBA needs funding in order to make that happen. Would it be too late to take the GMAT and apply for 2020 entry? So there's probably two parts to this question here. Potentially not too late to take the GMAT if you have some good time to dedicate to it. I think if you look at GMAT, the GMAT website, they will recommend somewhere between 60 and 100 hours of study. Personally, from my experiences over the last few years of constantly speaking to people who are applying, I would say there's very few people, well, a smaller number of people that manage to crack the GMAT by just taking a week off of work and cramming. I think most people that get to the sort of desired scores that they want over a period of time is through taking out set times each week in order to study. So I think we genuinely need a couple of months of dedication, you know, to the process. Also, you potentially need to give yourself time to reapply, to retake the GMAT or GRE. We absolutely do not judge you negatively in doing that. The second part to your question, is that it wouldn't be possible to do this without scholarship. You should be aware that scholarships are incredibly competitive. Around 20%, 25% of our students will have some sort of funding. However, these are not all full awards. Some of these will be partial awards. So I would just urge you, before kind of going into this process, to really look at what other options you may have available, because to, I think, enter into the MBA application process absolutely relying on it being fully funded via a scholarship just could be setting yourself up for some disappointment. But clearly we do have around 95 scholars out of 330 students this year. So I still think it's a pretty good number of people that are in receipt of some sort of support towards the programme.
Question here about academic performance. Someone got a 2-2 in their undergrad, but then really excelled in a postgraduate degree and got themselves, by the sound of it, a distinction. Is that okay academically? Well, the academics is just one. It is just one data point. So as I covered earlier, don't stress if you feel that your degree doesn't really showcase your ability. It could be that you went through university years ago and you've had a fabulous career since then, showing lots of progression. Rationale for doing an MBA makes complete sense. Your GMAT or GRE is strong, so don't worry about that kind of academic underperformance.
Somebody who has been in their current place of work for under 6 months, and would that be an acceptable place from which to give a reference? I think this really comes back to, with regards to references, we would recommend that you choose people who know you best. So if there's somebody who, if you're thinking about your 2 references, if there's somebody who knows you better, then maybe somebody who's known you for less than 6 months, might not be the strongest option. Obviously, you will know who your sort of best advocators are, who the people are that you would turn to, who really sort of understand your work, understand your abilities. So I would just sort of throw it back to you and ask you to sort of question if there's somebody who could be better. Okay. This is a good question. Would we take a GMAT score after the application is submitted? No, you do have to submit your application with a GMAT score. Obviously, if during the admissions process, this is where you need to be mindful, your application will be considered within 2 or 3 weeks of you applying. So we will obviously take, let's just say you've gone out and decided to retake the GMAT and you've got a better score during that process, you need to be careful of when that GMAT score might land with us, because it could be that you've already been considered on the weaker score. Some people actually get admitted to the programme and then even provide an improved GMAT score, and that might improve their chances of funding. But absolutely dependent on the timing of that, your application will be considered on the best score that we've received at the point of submission. Just to read, we've got a couple of questions here on the online assessment. If you go onto the MBA homepage, you go to how to apply, you scroll to the bottom, you can access our FAQs. In the FAQs, there is FAQs for in every section of the application individually, and there is a very good section there for the online assessment. I would urge anybody making an application to read that page. It is absolutely crucial, in my opinion, in terms of really understanding the online assessment, how the elements are made up. Obviously, Charlotte went through that in quite some detail, but you can really sort of understand the assessment, what you're going into. And as we have explained, there is absolutely ample time, as long as you submit in time, to ensure that you can have adequate time to practice with the system. I think with that, we are just sort of coming to a close. I just want to share some future dates with you. You may be aware we have a programme called the 1+1 MBA, where you study a master's in the first year, followed by an MBA in the second. That is a master's at Oxford, not somewhere else. And we do have a 1+1 webinar on Monday the 7th coming up, so do sign up for that if you might be interested in the 1+1. We do have an open day here in Oxford on the 18th of October, So that is a whole day event with lots of various sessions here at the school, including a taster lecture from a very popular MBA faculty called Professor Mark Sapan. We have a student panel webinar on Monday the 21st of October, and we have a further application tips webinar on Monday the 28th of October, just before the deadline. Over the coming weeks, if you go onto our website, we'll also be at the eFellows Frankfurt event on the 12th of October. We'll be in Johannesburg on the 17th, and in Zurich on the 30th of October. Moving into November, we shall be in Moscow on the 18th of November, and in Singapore during week commencing the 18th of November. That event is yet to appear on the website. If you do have questions regarding a specific application question, you can send these through to Oxford MBA at sbs.ox.ac.uk. I'm just popping that in the chat box for you. You will always get a reply to that within 5 working days from a member of the recruitment admissions team. So that's really the place to direct any very sort of specific or personal inquiries that you might have. So with that, thank you very much for listening in. Hope you found that interesting, informative. You've got some of your questions answered, and we hope to see you or interact with you further on your journey towards an MBA, and wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much.